Good afternoon, everybody. I will be short and sweet. There was enough talk at City Council today by some of our colleagues. So I will say this. As Chairman of the Zoning Committee, and I want to congratulate, obviously, the Mayor, the Mayor's office, the Commissioner of Housing, and our Commissioner on Department of Planning and Development for introducing, and of course the substitute that we passed today, working with our colleagues on trying to bring development, transit-oriented development to all parts of the city. As we noted through the briefings and hearing that the TODs have been successful in our city on the north and near northwest side, but only approximately 10% of these developments were happening on the south and or west side. So with the passage of today's ordinance, we are doubling the size of distance from the rail stations and from 2 to 4 blocks in circumference, and also adding bus lines with the 2-block radius for opportunities for development. And you know, we've lost, we need more population on the south and west side, and I think we've had these incentives, and we're going to double up on these incentives, increase the areas and the square footage that will be available for developers to do a lot of development, and hopefully a lot of affordable development around transit lines and bus lines. So we did some substitute changes. We can talk about them if you want, but at the end of the day, we got the ordinance passed that will really bring economic development to struggling neighborhoods. So I'm very proud that we got a really pretty lopsided vote with some of the substitutes that we brought forth, and I am excited that we're going to bring some new opportunities to some disinvested neighborhoods. With that, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere near this place without the Mayor's leadership, and I know the Mayor will talk a little bit about how important it is to really bring investment to all parts of the city. So, Mayor Lightfoot.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Tunney. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. Today I'm proud to share more about what transpired in City Council today that will help our residents. I want to acknowledge Alderman Walter Burnett, Department of Housing Commissioner Marissa Navarro, and Department of Planning Commissioner Maurice Cox, and also Michael Carter, who is a recipient of one of our programs that we're going to be talking about. All of us here share the belief that every resident should be able to experience the benefits of transit access so that they can easily travel to and from and reach amenities and opportunities found in communities throughout our city. We also believe that each and every community should have vibrant and walkable streets connecting residents to great jobs, schools, grocery stores, pharmacies, or whatever else they need. That's why I'm thrilled that the City Council today passed the Connected Communities Ordinance that Chairman Tunney just spoke about, which brings our city one step closer towards ensuring that every Chicagoan can live in a walkable, affordable community that is connected to transit and all of its benefits. And with the passage of this ordinance, we are also a step closer towards tackling segregation between neighborhoods of our city. Furthermore, this ordinance will create over 50,000 jobs annually and help us meet our climate goals. At its core, the Connected Communities Ordinance will enable investments and developments near transit while strengthening affordability requirements and improving neighborhood walkability. This ordinance not only extends development incentives more equitably across the city, but includes the strongest incentives yet for creating more affordable housing units and new developments. It also includes the first ever pedestrian safety standards for new construction near train stations citywide, and protections against the loss of 2 flats and 4 flats near transit in communities with displacement pressures. This encourages more sustainable, equitable development and welcoming streets for every Chicagoan. Whether a resident is walking, biking, driving, or in a wheelchair, they can participate in the economic and cultural vibrancy of our great city. Overall, this is a most comprehensive and equity-focused update to the city's equitable, transit-oriented development policies to date, building upon our commitment to the creation and preservation of affordable housing, as well as my commitment to revitalizing neighborhoods through transit initiatives. This comes at an important time as we're seeing the availability of more resources coming to our city. In particular, I'm excited about the prospects of finally getting the Red Line extension through the end of our outer edges of our city, but we can't do that without also having economic development around those transit stops. And I'm excited that this gives us yet another tool to accomplish that goal. There are a number of people that I need to thank, Chairman Tunney and the members of the zoning committee that worked hard with us to get this right. I want to also thank Elevated Chicago, a coalition of city and community-based groups who advocate for walkable, thriving communities. I also want to thank all the grassroots and civic partners who have pushed the city forward toward our more equitable future. I also want to thank the co-sponsors, Alderman Burnett, Alderwoman Haddon, Alderwoman Rodriguez Sanchez, and Alderman Laspada. Thank all you, one and all. I also have to thank my team. I want to thank Dan Laurie, our policy lead, and the policy team, some of whom are here today, who worked tirelessly on this effort for a very long time. I've got to thank IGA for doing the hard work of making sure that we were being responsive to the iterative process that is about democracy. Of course, I want to thank Commissioner Navarro, and I want to thank Commissioner Cox. This is a very big and important day for our city. Before I close, I'm pleased to share that City Council today passed critical ordinance enhancements promoting water access and affordability for residents. This ordinance includes three major components. One, it prohibits the future privatization of Chicago's water system, which is a no-brainer. Our water system is one of our greatest assets. It should always remain under the control of the city government and never be privatized. Two, it codifies the end of residential shutoffs for non-payment. In other words, no resident, I want me to underscore that again, no resident in Chicago will ever have their water shut off because of inability to pay. I made sure of that through an executive order early on in my tenure as mayor. Now it is codified into law. Very important step. And three, it increases requirements for transparent reports to the City Council Committee on Budget and Government Operations and a Committee on Finance regarding water debt, water meter installation, and critical water affordability measures. Since I became mayor, I strongly believe that water is a basic human right, period. We can't function without having access to water. And it shouldn't be that if you can't afford to pay, that somehow you are lesser and that human right is taken away from you. It's wrong, it's unethical, and we will never do that again in the city of Chicago, I am very proud to say. Let me also say this. We also know, though, that from time to time, people have challenges and struggles paying their water bills, paying their sewer bills. That's why 2 years ago, we stood up the utility billing relief and low-income household water assistance programs. And in a nutshell, if you're having trouble paying, we can help you. We can tailor a payment plan that suits what your financial needs and wherewithal are. And if you pay, if you have accumulated debt, you pay for 1 year in that payment plan, your old debt is washed away. Yes, pun intended. I'm proud of the work that our teams have done to make sure that we are delivering for the residents of the city, and the city utility billing relief program is critically important. If you are hearing this press conference and you want to know more about how you can get access to this vital program, please visit utilitybill.chicago.gov. That's utilitybill.chicago.gov, or simply call 311 and say, I want to know about that utility billing relief program that the mayor talked about. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Department of Housing Commissioner Marisa Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon. Over the past 3 years, a working group of dedicated leaders brought together by Elevated Chicago worked with the City of Chicago to create a transit-oriented development plan that would create jobs, improve pedestrian safety, and increase affordable housing options near Chicago's vast public transit network. I want to say a word about why we did this. You've heard from both the mayor and Chairman Tunney about what's in the actual ordinance, so I won't run through that, but I do want to talk just a little bit about why. This is not the city's first rodeo when it comes to transit-oriented development. There's been an ordinance in place since 2013, and it has been updated before, but this one is different. At the start of Mayor Lightfoot's administration in 2019, we sat down with Elevated Chicago and their partners, and we analyzed the data of how TOD was working. You heard about this from Chairman Tunney. 90% of developments from 2013 to 2019 were on the northwest sides, West Loop, downtown. In other words, to that point, TOD had largely bypassed the south and west side, even though we have really rich transit networks on the south and west side, bus, rail, metro. So we knew we had a lot of work to do to right those inequities, and that work turned into the city's first equitable transit-oriented development policy plan that passed unanimously out of Plan Commission last year, and today we celebrate the passage of the city's first equitable transit-oriented development ordinance. So I want to thank first and foremost the mayor. We introduced a very strong ordinance on this based on her push and her support. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Chairman Tunney for your support and passage, and to our aldermanic co-sponsors, including here with us, Alderman Burnett. And I want to just say a word about the incredible coalition that really locked arms with us to first determine what was needed and then do the hard work of getting to today. And actually, it is such a robust coalition that the list is too long to read, but I'll just say a few. We've talked about Elevated Chicago, Palenque Logan Square Neighborhood Association, Endeleo Institute, Greater Chatham Initiative, Emerald South, the East Garfield Park Community Conservation, Chicago Urban League, Federation of Labor, Metropolitan Planning Council, Active Transportation Alliance, Illinois Environmental Council. This group was on it. In fact, every time I reached out to an alder person, almost, I heard, I've already heard from my community on this. In fact, Alderman Burnett called me one time and said, your people just left, I'm in. So with that extraordinary level of support and push from community-based and citywide groups, I can assure you that what was accomplished today is just a start. We're so thrilled about this work. Thank you. Up next is Commissioner Maurice Cox from the Department of Planning and Development.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So the Connected Community Ordinance has passed. So finally, we give all neighborhoods a fair shake of being socially, environmentally, and economically designed around equity. So it's a very, very, very important step to furthering the city's goals of encouraging the kind of vibrancy and sustainability in development that we all know has avoided so many communities that have historically kind of languished, even if they had access to transit. So this is a really powerful tool that will allow us to achieve a goal that we have to create 15-minute neighborhoods throughout Chicago that allow people across this city to be no more than a 15-minute walk from a transit station, and to access to jobs, and to a 15-minute walk from a host of amenities that we know define the very quality of life we want in our neighborhoods. So this type of development is not new. Many in the city have had the advantage of transit-oriented development. We know residents all throughout the city have asked for it. Business owners support it. Developers support it. and the level of community engagement to get us to this day today is evidence that this is where Chicago needs to be. So the policies in the ordinance are the product, as you've heard, of 3 years of coalition building that has worked on the idea of how do we make equity tangible to residents. And in the meantime, we have been piloting equitable transit-oriented development. So we already have evidence of planning and housing initiatives that are showing us what equity in development looks like. And so I would just say that the Invest Southwest initiatives have prioritized proximity to transit. These have led to catalytic projects along the corridors. So with this ordinance, those type of developments are codified in public policy and will go on for years and years to come. So for us, this is a part of healing. It's a part of healing some of the harmful effects that previous policies have resulted in over past decades, and we are turning the corner. So through this ordinance, I feel we'll be able to see the 15-minute neighborhood be realized across the city. It's about pedestrians first. It's about living in the city without a car. It's about having access to transit. So I congratulate all of those who fought long and hard to make this happen. And I'd like to bring to the podium Michael Carter as our last speaker.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Michael Carter. I live out in Riverdale, and I'm so thankful to our mayor and the city for what they've done for me. I didn't have no water in my house for 16 years. I got real sick, so I wasn't able to work for it. So I had no money or nothing for 16 years. No water. My water bill was $44,000. $44,000. And I'm not gonna get into the details of me living without the water because people donated just for 16 years. I had no heat for 7 years. I went down and I had made some little videos because with the sewage and everything, it was horrible. I wouldn't go into detail of it unless somebody had asked me at a later date. But at any rate, I went down to the water people, and I met I told this lady that I was how I didn't have any water or nothing, and I didn't have any. And then they messed around. They gave me Social Security. They wound up giving me that because at first they kept denying me. So they put me on this program she talked about. All I have to do is pay $100. I got 4 more months to do it. And then the elevator, they came over, they put in a new tub, new sink, new water pipes, it's amazing. I can't believe it, And I'm really thankful for you. I love you all so much for this. You just don't know how it feels. Every time I go home, I just turn on the water, Yeah, so like I said, I got a sink. They got mad because with my Social Security, I said, can I go buy a jacuzzi? They said, no, you got to just get the issues I haven't. So I want to really thank you all for this program. It's just very, for somebody like me, it's true. It was something else, and I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you. I love you, Mayor Lightfoot, and my city, and thank you so kindly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I'm the last speaker, and I'm Alderman Walter Burnett. And I'm just happy to be a co-sponsor of the ETOD. I'd like to commend the mayor. I'd like to commend the commissioners. I'd like to commend all of the organizations who've been working over 3 years to try to put this together. The unique thing about this, it touches some of our most vulnerable citizens in our city. A lot of our elderly or baby boomers, like I'm the end of, a lot of them don't want to drive. with the gas prices, can't afford to drive. They rather have public transportation, but at the same time, they don't want to walk a long way, or they can't walk a long way. So this gives an opportunity to put housing close to the L stations in order for them to be able to be close to transportation and still be able to go downtown and, you know, meet up with their boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever the case may be, and have a good time like most retired people do. But also, it touches the young people. A lot of young people graduate from college. They end up getting entry-level jobs. A lot of them don't make a lot of money. A lot of them love to ride bikes or take public transportation and love to be able to just take transportation to work. So that gives them an opportunity to live in an affordable place where they can take public transportation and be able to get to their jobs. So it expands the city to go further west and further south and give these folks an opportunity. The city has been connecting people to transportation for some time. We're getting ready to open up an L stop on Damon and Lake, which actually did the opposite and brought transportation to people who live in affordable housing to be able to get downtown. But at the same time, now the city is expanding that connection to bring affordable housing to those L stops. If you go on to some parts of the south and the west side, you see a lot of vacant lots around the L stations. What this does is make it more affordable for developers to build in these areas, because they may not be able to make more of a profit in those areas because it's so expensive to build. But by not having to put in a lot of parking in their buildings, it make it more reasonable for them to build and for them to have affordable housing so people can live there. And now you solving a lot of things. You filling in vacant lots. You bringing more tax dollars to the city. You helping the environment because less people are driving now, right? So you have less emissions in the air, and you're giving folks an opportunity to be able to come and enjoy the amenities. So it's a win-win situation, but not only do it take care of the people on both ends of the spectrum with the elderly folks and the young folks, it get everyone in the middle. So this is a great thing. I commend all of the advocates for being involved. I thank all of my colleagues that did vote on it for voting on it, and I know the ones who didn't vote on it are going to rep the benefits of all of us for voting for it. So I just want to say congratulations and thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all for allowing me to be a co-sponsor on this ordinance. Thank you all very much. Congratulations.
So before we take your questions, I just want to say, Mr. Carter, thank you. Thank you for coming here and sharing your story with us. And I'm glad that you've got your water turned back on, hopefully your heat too. And folks, I'd like to say that Mr. Carter's story is rare and unique, but it's not. There's a lot of people out there who need our help, a lot of people who are struggling, and we've got to make sure that we do everything that we can to continue reaching our residents, particularly in this difficult time that they are experiencing coming out of the pandemic. And there's a lot of things that we've done over the last 3 years to help our residents weather these very difficult storms. And this utility billing relief program, I think, is one of the best things that we have absolutely done. So with that, happy to take your questions.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. Appreciate it. Members of the media, Asha and I will come down and give you the mic. 2 questions per reporters. And just be courteous, just because there's about 11 reporters, so we want to get to everyone. Correct, there you go. Heather, WTTW.
Hi, Mayor. 2 times the Citizens Office of Police Accountability has determined that officers who responded to the unrest in 2020 lied about those interactions with members of the public, and COPA recommended they be terminated for that. Does that represent a pattern in the Chicago Police Department that you're concerned about? And what would you say to people who interacted with officers on that day and who have now seen that the officers told investigators things that were not true?
Are you saying that there were 2 times over
Yes.
the course of...
Involving Miracle Boyd outside the Columbus statue and involving Mia Wright at the Brickyard?
Well, this is precisely why we have a system of accountability in the city. And it sounds like the system worked.
HUD yesterday found that the city of Chicago had engaged in discriminatory processes involving the siting of the new General Iron facility on the southeast side. Your office said in a statement you reject those findings. How do you explain moving a facility that pollutes from Lincoln Park, which is 80% white, to a part of the city that's 83% black and Latino?
Well, recall that the Department of Public Health denied the permit. So anything that doesn't acknowledge the fact that the city denied the permit and didn't allow that requested use is completely wrong. It is preposterous to suggest that even the consideration of the permit application, which we must do as a right, somehow was a housing discrimination. I've never understood the HUD's theory of jurisdiction, but we'll let the lawyers sort it out. But it's preposterous in all of its permutations to suggest that somehow we discriminated in housing by entertaining a permit of a company that, by the way, has been in that community for several decades.
Greg, ABC.
Mayor, you mentioned, interestingly enough, about the drag racing, that there's information suggesting a lot of these organizers and the drivers are coming from out of the city. Do you think there's going to be a significant problem actually going after these people if they're not in the city? You know, how are you going to impound vehicles that are coming from elsewhere?
Well, I don't want to go through all the things that I think the police department now will be able to do as a result of the passage of this ordinance. But suffice it to say, these organized events are a significant hazard. And I think by significantly upping the fines, by giving more latitude to do towing, and I think the police department will also use some other techniques to make sure that when the police do come, one of the big things that we've seen is when the police do come, then everybody tries to scatter, but they're driving over sidewalks, they're driving through lawns and making even more of a hazard. So there's a lot of discussion within the police department about new strategies to address these issues. And we will be looking at where the people that the cars that we tow, the people that are charged, where they come from, and working with those communities to the extent that they're outside of the city of Chicago. We've got, I think, a great record of working with our regional partners on a range of public safety issues, and this will be included in that list.
This morning, a couple of ordinances introduced on police mental health and wellness, including a couple from O'Shea and Napolitano, that would, in essence, allow police to refuse the overtime or not take the canceled days off except for big weekends and major emergencies. Would you support that kind of ordinance?
No.
Why not?
I don't think it's appropriate for the city council to be setting the personnel rules and policies of the Chicago Police Department. That would be a pretty extraordinary thing. I don't know that there's any precedent in history. Obviously, we're very concerned about the mental health and well-being of our officers. You've heard me say this many, many times, that I'll repeat it because I think some folks haven't heard it. Being the police in this time is extraordinarily difficult. And I hope you all actually report that and not little snippets. Let me say it again for those of you who seem to have some difficulty reporting what my words are. It's very difficult to be the police. Probably the most difficult time in our nation's history. And as our folks at the Department of Public Health have said, particularly these last 2 years, the surge in challenges that people are facing from a mental health standpoint has exploded exponentially. And with it, unfortunately, suicides. And police are not immune from the same kind of stresses and trauma that all of us experience on a daily basis. But layering onto that, the fact that they are meeting people on their most difficult days, and that trauma is something that it's almost impossible not to carry with you. Now, I can't sit here and tell you, nor would I even try, what motivates or what the deciding factors are in people who choose to take their life. But what I do know is that this is a department that now understands the necessity of really emphasizing health and well-being. It's one of the strategic pillars of the superintendent's strategic plan. We, with the assistance of City Council, put $20 million more on top of what was already allocated for officer wellness that's being utilized in this year, and I expect us to build upon that, hiring more clinicians, opening up more facilities to help support officers and their families. So this is a really difficult time. I certainly understand the concern of the aldermen, and we have always been, as we did last month when we passed an ordinance to provide survivor benefits for family members where officers had committed suicide. These are complicated issues. They require us to work together to work through them. We've committed to doing that. We are doing that. But what I don't want to do is, for the sake of pandering to a crowd, do something that frankly undermines the flexibility that every single department needs to have to address emerging HR issues.
All right, Alex Sitkin.
Hello. On the property tax levy and CPI, the other day you said that there might be some guardrails this year to prevent what would otherwise be a 9% increase in property taxes. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Does that mean a permanent change to that provision in the city code so that it wouldn't go above a certain amount, or does that just mean a one-year holiday to get past this year?
We are having conversations about what the appropriate steps are, and when those are ready, I'd be happy to share them with you.
Like with the budget, before the budget?
As I said, we are having discussions about what the appropriate guardrails are, and when they are ready, be happy to share them with you.
Okay. So there was a lot of talk in council today about potentially lowering the speed limit from 30 to 25 miles an hour the way other cities like New York have done. Is that the logical next step here to try to get people to slow down?
I think there's a number of things that we have to do, and that's certainly something that we are looking at. Cities across the country have done that to lower overall what the speed level limits are, and I think that's something we have to take a look at. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to really emphasize to folks what the consequences are of speeding, distracted driving, and frankly, a bigger, longer issue is vehicle construction. Because vehicles now, if you get hit, as you heard, over a certain level, your chances of survival really are reduced. So a lot of the car safety has been built around the driver and the passengers inside the cars, but there hasn't been the kind of science and research, I think, that there needs to be around what the consequences are of a collision for other cars and also for pedestrians. I know that that's an issue that the Secretary Buttigieg and his team are looking at and having conversations with car manufacturers about. So I think there's a number of different things that we need to look at, and not the least of which is to really tell people, slow down. Speed does kill. And we've got to really emphasize that. We all saw through the pandemic when there were fewer cars that were on the road, people were just driving like mad. Back in the day when I drove myself frequently, I saw it myself, and I'm going to say I was guilty of it. Now as a passenger, watching what people do when they're driving, the amount of people that are looking at their phones, putting on makeup. I mean, I've seen everything under the sun, and it's extraordinary to me. And it would be laughable to some extent, except it has deadly consequences. So I think that we will continue working with CDOT and Public Health and our police department to really emphasize people have to slow down because lives are depending upon it. You heard, I think, very powerful testimony today from a number of aldermen, and I'm going to call out in particular Alderman LaSpada, who read the names of people who have been killed just this year, and not all of them. This is a huge public safety and public health crisis that we absolutely must address.
Greg Pratt.
Good afternoon, Mayor. So the Sun-Times had a big story about arrests being down, and arrests are down citywide. Are you concerned about the amount of arrests being down, and how do you raise them up so that you have fewer unarrested crimes?
Well, you ask an interesting but I think complicated question. And let me start by saying, despite the fact that arrests are down, our officers are working very, very hard. They're on track to surpass the number of illegal guns that they're taking off the street. And I believe as of yesterday's numbers, we're down 15% in homicides and almost 20% down in shootings. I think you also have to account for the fact that in prior years, some of those arrests were for marijuana possession, which is now that marijuana is legalized in Illinois. Obviously, it's not a surprise that some of those numbers are down. I think what I would say is we should never encourage arrests for arrest's sake. The arrest should be people that are committing felonies. So the test is felony arrest, not arrest overall. And I think the superintendent and his team are really placing an emphasis on making sure that we hold violent, dangerous people accountable, felony arrest, and particularly emphasis on people possessing and obviously using firearms. So the number being down in and of itself, I don't think really tells the whole story. We have to really look at what are those arrests? Are they felony arrests? And importantly, what are the consequences, meaning what are the results in terms of public safety? And I think what we've seen year over year and month over month, even more remarkable, is a pretty significant downturn in shootings and homicides, which is a good thing. And I'll repeat it again and hope that the media actually prints this. We're down almost 15% in homicides and almost 20% in shootings year to date.
Well, and on the subject of public safety, there's a recurring criticism out there was made earlier by the aldermen who were doing their press conference about their stuff today, O'Shea, Lopez, Tabarez. One of the criticisms on public safety is that some police officers feel restrained. You know, the way they often express it is let the police be the police. I'm just wondering if you can, and that's a phrase I think I used today, understanding reform is important, obviously, but what do you say to people who feel that the pendulum has shifted too far and officers don't feel second-guessed or don't feel comfortable doing their jobs?
Well, there's no question that there's more scrutiny on law enforcement now probably than at any other time. But I don't think that's a bad thing. And when I hear those, let the police be the police, oh, you mean like John Birch? You mean like SOS? You mean like the people who caused the taxpayers of this city to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements and judgments and attorney's fees? Those folks? You mean what happened before we put in constraints around police pursuits where people were driving, sometimes with lights and sirens, sometimes not, at speeds in excess of 80 and 100 miles an hour. And in the 5 years before I became mayor, the city paid out over $100 million in settlements and judgments because of car pursuits? Or you mean the circumstances where, and foot pursuits, one of the most dangerous activities that the police can engage in, where too many people ended up getting shot in the back? So when you sign up for an organization like law enforcement that's led by civilians in the construct of a constitution where we have to abide by people's civil rights, if that's not the job that you want and you feel like we're holding you back, it's probably not a job for you to be in the city of Chicago. There have to be rules. And fundamentally what this comes down to is this. For way too long in this city, things have happened with policing that have undermined the legitimacy of the police in communities all over our city, particularly black and brown communities. You cannot be successful in serving and protecting the residents of the city if you do not respect their civil rights. And the notion that we would turn back the clock, as some have advocated, and let the police be the police, not on my watch.
Alice, Tribune.
Hi, Mayor. My first question is, when is your office going to announce appointments for the interim commissioners of the Civilian Police Oversight Board, and why the long wait?
As soon as we are finished with the evaluation of the names that have come forward to us, we'll be announcing them. That's in process right now.
If I could follow up, will that be by next month?
As soon as they're done, we'll let you know.
Okay, also wondering, on the provisions in the ethics and transit equity packages that were taken out during negotiations, are there any that you want to work to bring back, or do you think what passed today suffices?
Well, as you know, the legislative process is one of compromise, debate, and discussion. I'm very proud of the legislation that was passed. It's a major accomplishment for our city, both from ethics and from ETOD. So let's have a moment where we actually celebrate what we did get done.
Marianne Ahern.
Thank you, Mayor. We've been trying to ask folks at your office, can you give us any more info on that NASCAR contract? What exactly will the city get from NASCAR? Because there are several other cities who rejected the NASCAR offer.
So I don't have all of those details at my fingertips, but we'd be happy to get that from you. Talk to Cesar about what your specific questions are. But let's be clear, this is a massive, massive good thing for our city. The fact that NASCAR will come to Chicago, expose our residents, and particularly I'm looking forward to the opportunity for young people to see not only the newest generation of cars, not only experience what happens with these drivers, but to really look behind the scenes and understand how the STEM education that they're getting might actually translate to either being a driver, maybe a person in a pit crew, somebody who designs these high-end cars. And of course, we know this from when NASCAR came to our city with the esports, I think a year plus ago. This was like a love letter to Chicago. And being able to promote our city across the globe and the beauty and splendor of it in early July, I'm very excited about that opportunity. But obviously, with every contract that we enter into, being fiscally prudent is always key.
And then next week, the DNC comes to Chicago for a site visit. Any insight on what the best places you like to show off?
Well, I don't know that that's been confirmed by the DNC, so I don't want to get ahead of that.
Well, your own social media just promoted it and said, can't wait to see her or something like that. So clearly.
Justin Lawrence.
Pardon me?
Justin Lawrence.
Hold on, let me, I think she was still talking. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities for us to showcase the city, and as you might imagine, when the DNC does come for a site visit, they have very specific things that they want to see, particularly around venues, logistics, meeting the folks who will be, that we would put forward as a team to manage the convention. So when they come, it'll be a very busy schedule, but obviously we're going to be making sure that we showcase the best of Chicago.
Justin Lawrence.
Hi, Mayor. Excuse me. Back to NASCAR. You briefly spoke about that contract. What, if anything, beyond that contract, or even that contract, will need city council approval? And kind of following up on that, the Sun-Times quoted Alderman Riley and Dow and King, the downtown aldermen, that were pretty upset that they didn't get any sort of.
That's just not true.
So
that's just not true. Every single alderman for whom this touched was consulted ahead of time, had a briefing from NASCAR and our team, with the exception of Hopkins. They reached out to him, but he either couldn't accommodate the schedule, but it's just simply not true that they were not consulted ahead of time and weren't briefed. That's just not true.
When were those briefings? Were they like 2 days ago or?
They have been spread out over a period of time based upon what the alderman's availability was, yes.
Okay, and on the needing city council approval part, what part of this race will need city council approval?
I am not sure that any part of it will, but obviously, we don't engage in something this big and significant without talking to our city council partners.
Okay, and back to the CPI increase, you know, when that was passed, and then even last year, the second year of it, the argument was that it gives taxpayers reliability. They know what's coming. Predictability, yes. And now this will be the first year that inflation is kind of soared and that it's going to reach that 5% cap. And you're talking about possibly not going up to that 5%. You know, how does that provide predictability to taxpayers?
So you're suggesting that we should exceed that?
I'm suggesting that that's what the provision called.
I don't think that anyone anticipated that the inflation and CPI would go to the levels that we've seen this year. And as a consequence, the thing I wanted to avoid, which was not part of your question, it's not just about predictability. It's about a system before where, because there was such a fear of property tax increases, we'd avoid it for years, and then there would be this massive spike that would be the largest property tax increase in the history of the city over and over and over again. That doesn't make any sense to me, and it didn't make any sense to us when we proposed it to City Council when it was passed. So again, we're in unusual territory here because of the level of inflation that we've seen, but we're not interested at a time when people are struggling to keep up with inflation, whether it's gas prices, groceries, all the other things that have gone up over the course of this year, of hitting them with a whopping property tax increase. So as I've said now several times, but I'll repeat it again for your benefit, we are looking at ways in which we can put some guardrails around the CPI to keep it manageable and not place an undue burden on the taxpayers of the city.
Thanks, Mayor. Aaron?
Hi, going back to Civilian Oversight Commission, are you worried at all that any further delay in choosing, you know, your picks for this commission is going to seep into election season, as petitions can be passed beginning next month and people are going to be, you know, potentially running for the district councils?
Well, as you know, there was a long period of time before those names got to me. What I think I have an obligation to do is to make sure that we have done our diligence in understanding who these folks are, so we make picks that make sense, and that it's like a puzzle piece. You want to make sure, given the parameters of the ordinance, that there's balance and representation as defined by the ordinance. So we're working our way through that. We'll get to it, and we are going to make these announcements as quickly as we can.
I guess, but what is left to do? I mean, City Council took time to vet these, their picks, and...
You're making an assumption that is not correct.
Shruti?
What is that assumption?
You're making an assumption that the full vet that we would ordinarily do with anyone that's a city commissioner was done by the City Council. That's not correct.
Thank you, Aaron. Shruti, Bloomberg?
Good afternoon, Mayor. My question is a little bit broader, but it touches on several of the topics discussed today. You also talked about the Chicago Recovery Plan earlier this week. My question is about where you see the Chicago economy going from here. Chicago has been a long-term economic anchor of the Midwest, but increasingly you're seeing smaller cities compete for whether it's corporate headquarters, company expansions, tourist conventions, whether it's DNC or something else. How do you hope to stem or curb the losses?
Well, there's an assumption baked into your question that I don't agree with. And I don't agree with because the data says something entirely different. Last year, we had 173 companies make pro-Chicago decisions. 73 of those were corporate relocations. from companies that could have literally gone anywhere in the country but chose Chicago, and another 100 Chicago companies that expanded their footprint. This year already, we have 99 companies that have made pro-Chicago decisions, and I'm happy to report that a material percentage, both last year and this year, are going into Invest Southwest communities. As you know, I just came back from a business development trip to London and to Paris, and I'm very confident that in both of those cities, we're going to generate new opportunities for businesses to come to Chicago. So the premise of your question is somehow we're losing all this business and we're competing against smaller cities. That's not what the data says. And I feel very confident that we are and will always remain the economic center, not only of the state of Illinois, but in the entire Midwest. People will come to Chicago to reach the markets here, but to also reach the markets in our surrounding states. So I feel very comfortable about where we're situated. We had one of the best economic years in 2021 that the city has seen in recent years. We're off to an incredible start this year. So I feel very good about how we are recovering, and that doesn't happen by accident, but it happens because people have confidence in our economy, the most diverse economy of any big city in the country, a plethora of diverse talent to populate those different businesses. And when you're seeing some of the big companies like Kellogg, like Abbott, come to Chicago, I think that tells you really all you need to know, which is they're betting on our city because our city has everything that it needs for businesses to be successful.
But do you see an increased level of competition from other smaller cities? I mean, populations have grown in a lot of cities that are smaller than Chicago because of, whether it's, lower taxes or weather or whatever it is. But I'm just wondering if you've seen that increase.
What I actually see is Chicago having another advantage that you haven't listed, which is that we believe in justice for all, that we believe in the bodily autonomy of women, that we believe in allowing women to make their own choices about the situation of where and when they will access reproductive health care and bear children. We believe in making sure that the LGBTQ plus community has a place here and safety. We believe in not tolerating discrimination against Asians, against Jews, against immigrants and refugees. This value statement of the city is a differentiator for us. And I know that because I've been in those rooms talking about these very issues and talking to business people that are having second and third thoughts about being in states that devalue the rights of their employees and residents and that undermine the value statements that all of these companies have. It's hard to live in those values when you are located in a state that devalues all the things that are important and consistent with your company's ethos. So I see us actually as having an incredible competitive advantage based upon what is happening across our country, and we are leaning into that advantage.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll go all the way to the back. Craig Delmore.
Hello,
Craig,
Mayor.
there you are.
Let me follow up on that last question. Is it possible to quantify what you're hearing or how much you're hearing from either other companies or business groups responding to that Chicago represents different values?
Well, I can't tell you specific data yet, although we are tracking that. But what I can share with you anecdotally is that this message of being a welcoming city for all, of standing for justice for all, really, really resonates with the CEOs who are hearing from their employees, particularly the younger generation. We don't want to work, we don't want to live in a state that doesn't respect our rights or our values. This is a big conversation that is happening in the C-suites all across the country, and we are taking that message aggressively not just in advertisements in the Wall Street Journal, not just in advertisements in publications in Texas and in Florida, but we are taking that directly to the business leaders and challenging them, but also giving them information about why Chicago is a better option for them. So that's what I meant when I said we're leaning into it. It's something we talk a lot about. For example, when we were in London and Paris last week, we talked a lot about this issue with European countries, companies that may have been thinking about other places in the country, and we said, not so fast. Recognize what's going on the ground in the United States. And if you care about these issues, then you're going to pick a city like Chicago, because we are going to always stand for equal rights for all.
And my other question, a quick one. You established during the debate that there is no speed camera moratorium here in the city of Chicago. You also heard from the aldermen who are saying we want more. What are the, I shouldn't say what are the odds, but what's the outlook for some of those areas getting cameras where people are saying we want them, there's too much speeding here?
Well, look, this has obviously got to be a data-driven process, because that's what state law requires. But we've already reached out to those aldermen to say, let's sit down and have a conversation. Or some of them were already actually on a list. And, you know, the cameras, like almost everything in our life these days, the supply chain challenges is disrupting our ability to deliver on those cameras. So I think the probabilities are quite high.
Mallory, WLS.
Hello. I'd like to go to ETOD and how it aims at bringing affordable housing to transit areas for Alderman Walter Burnett brought up for college students. I think in the meeting it was also discussed baby boomers who are looking to stay in their neighborhoods and use transit. But we're missing a huge chunk in there. How do you nurture the 20-somethings to 40-somethings that are in between those ages that maybe live by transit, are moving out of the need for affordable housing into maybe a single-family home or a single-family unit? How do we nurture as a city those individuals who may be leaving because they're past that affordable housing stage but still want to live by transportation and have ownership?
Great question. I'll start, and then I'll invite Commissioner Navarro to come in. Look, what we've heard over and over again, and what we know, is we don't have enough affordable housing. And I think that actually is hitting still the demographic that you're talking about. There's a lot of opportunities if you want to buy a house in Chicago, and buy a house. I mean, again, another of our great strengths, I think that differentiates us from other cities that we talk about all the time, is it's affordable here. You can own a home. And so, for example, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but indulge me. For those companies that are working their tails off to get investments, to get venture capital investments, to get growth capital investments, the last thing that they want to do is have to pay all that money out in, for example, overhead to their employees for things like housing. They'd rather have those monies and reinvest them in the business and growth. So Chicago remains a city that, for a certain demographic, is very affordable. But what we do know is that for other demographics, it is not affordable. And you know, again, Commissioner Cox and I and other parts of our delegation were in London and Paris, where we're seeing some, I think, very unique things that both of those cities are doing to build the 15-minute neighborhood, which means that you have a range of options, price points for housing and amenities for people in those neighborhoods. So this, to me, is a really important step, particularly if we think about being able to retain population in areas of our city that don't have a sufficient level of housing. This is a really, really important step. That's why we fought so hard for it. That's why we spent so much time working with a range of different advocates. But I think it solves a problem that is very acute, and we've got to make sure that it happens. We spent a lot of time, for example, talking with developers that want to take advantage of this right away. And as I said, for me, what I also think about is when we extend that red line down to Alcott Gardens, what are we doing with those stops to make sure they're not vast wastelands, that there is a booming economy that accompanies the development of those train stops with the extension of the red line? Commissioner?
Thanks for the question. I'll give you an example that we covered yesterday in a press conference that we had. We had the developers of a development called 43 Green at 43rd Street in the Green Line. It was actually one of the very first meetings I had as a commissioner. They came in to pitch me on this, and I remember both of them talked about something they said again yesterday, which was, we both have 20-something children who do not drive, who take transit, and we are actually building this with them and their friends in mind. What the development is, again, right next to the Green Line, it's half market rate and half subsidized, about 50 units each. And so the idea is that we're getting at the range of people who don't want to or need to drive or drive often, and that we can use our subsidies to leverage, and the private market can kind of co-leverage a development right next to transit where we're getting at a range of incomes. When you're speaking directly to homeownership, I think one of the things we've spent a fair amount of time at the community level in education around, sometimes we hear people say, but we want more homeownership. And where we need to spend and have spent some time together with Commissioner Cox and some communities is to say, we hear that loud and clear, but within 4 blocks of a transit stop is not where we're looking to emphasize single-family homes. We might be looking to emphasize, if we're interested in homeownership, maybe condos, and that's why today we passed a condo and co-op loan fund to make sure that those folks that are already in those kinds of buildings can stay there. But fundamentally, we're looking for our densest development near transit with reduced parking. And when that can be home ownership, great. In our most challenged neighborhoods, it's hard to do condo buildings in that way, so we're mostly talking about rental in those spaces.
Thank you. For the mayor, again, just a question about Cam Buckner put out a statement. This is in regards to the HUD letter and investigation. His quote is, "Your ego threatens to cost Chicago hundreds of millions of dollars in federal housing grants." Do you regret ever kind of making the possible decision of moving General Iron? I know that you didn't. Essentially, the city just took that back, but do you regret ever going through that motion?
So as I've said many times, it's the silly season. And people will say outrageous, uninformed, self-serving things to have reporters report on it. I'm not going to help them by taking the bait.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Have a great day.